Hey everyone, welcome to another deck tech. Today we are going to be looking at Jund Tarmohawk. Alright, Jund Tarmohawk is a fun deck. Last week I deck tech Sultai Tarmohawk, so basically the Sultai version of this deck. And today we're going to be looking at the Jund version, and next week we'll be finishing off with the Abzan version. So that's all going to be interesting, stay tuned for that. But today, Jund, let's take a look at the core. Nothing changes here in terms of the core. So we're still looking at 4 of Nighthawk Scavengers, 4 of Thieves Guild Enforcers, and 4 of Tarmogoyfs. Now, if you watched last week's deck tech, you know how these work together, but if you haven't, I'll go through this really quickly. So Nighthawk Scavenger came in Zendikar Rising. When I first saw this card, I fell in love with it almost as quickly as I fell in love with Tarmogoyf when I first saw Tarmogoyf. And, you know, it's kind of like Tarmogoyf's not so strong cousin, but in some ways it's stronger than Tarmogoyf. Listen, Nighthawk Scavenger flies in the air, it has Death Touch, and it has Lifelink. All of those abilities are super relevant and modern. You don't have many threats in the air, first of all. Second of all, the ability to have Lifelink on a creature that can have easily 4 to 5 power in most games is incredible, and the cost is only 3 CMC. And it grows as your opponent's graveyard grows, at least in terms of card types. Just kind of like Tarmogoyf, but Tarmogoyf also feeds off of your graveyard. So at the end of the day, Tarmogoyf is still going to be better. It's going to have a bigger butt, and it's never going to die to Lightning Bolt as easily as Nighthawk Scavenger does. But nonetheless, I think both of them work together very well, and I think you guys saw that already with the Sultai version, and today you're going to be looking at Jund. Thieves Guild Enforcer is another card that I absolutely loved when it was printed. I just think it's awesome. Just its ability to mill your opponent every time it comes into the battlefield or other rogues come into the battlefield. Synergizes really well with Nighthawk Scavenger as well. And yeah, it becomes a 3-2 threat when your opponent's graveyard gets big enough, which is pretty quickly. And multiple of these just becomes hilarious, because then you get 2, 3, 4 triggers. It's just awesome. And it makes your Tarmogoyf and your Nighthawk Scavengers get bigger. So there you go. The creatures. So we don't have Uro, obviously, because we're not playing blue, but we do have Kroxa and we have Bloodbraid Elf. So Kroxa, not as strong as Uro, obviously, and we definitely don't want 4 of. I did have 4 of at one point of this in the earlier iterations of this deck, you know, as I was grinding, and I found too many was just not good. Kroxa is great, but drawing too many of it in a game just kind of feels weak. So 2 I found was the best number. And I mean, it's getting rid of cards in your opponent's hand, and that's really what a lot of what this deck does, and what the Sultai version of this deck does. Remember what I said: you're attacking your opponent essentially everywhere. You're attacking your opponent in the air, you're attacking your opponent on the ground, you're attacking your opponent's library, and you're attacking your opponent's hand. And from the sideboard, you could also attack their graveyard if need be by surgically extracting the card that you don't want there. So Kroxa stays true to that strategy. It forces your opponent to discard a card from their hand, and if they discard a land, they're going to lose 3 life, which is, you know, relevant. And once your opponent has nothing in hand, they're always losing 3 life, and that's also powerful. So I think 2 Kroxas are more than enough. The other creatures in this deck, including Bloodbraid Elf, really help, you know, round out the threat package. So looking at Bloodbraid Elf, we have 4 of. Of course we do. I think if we're playing Jund, it would be wrong not to play Bloodbraid Elf in a deck like this, essentially a mid-rangey deck, and Bloodbraid Elf just cascades into everything else you're playing. Very powerful card. It's a 3-2, which is essentially what your Thieves Guild Enforcer is most of the game, and it has haste, and it's great. I mean, there's a reason why Bloodbraid Elf has stuck around for so long, why it was banned at one point. Very powerful with Cascade, and it fits very well in this deck. We're playing a lot of removal. Look at all this removal. I think this is one of the records for me so far in decks I've teched on this channel in terms of the removal package, but let's take a look at them really quickly here. Fatal Push, of course, 2 of. I think 2 is fine. There's a mix of creatures right now in the meta, but most creatures are 3 CMC or less. Fatal Push targets 2 CMC or less without conditions, which is going to be pretty good, at least in the early game, and then in the later game you're going to have to make sure you have a fetch or something to trigger its revolt ability, of course. So I think 2 of is perfectly fine. You have access to better removal here, more consistent removal that we'll see soon. Tarfire, I had space for Tarfire here, so I decided to play 2 of. Tarfire is really here to just grow your Tarmogoyf more than anything else, because it is a tribal instant, so it counts as 2 separate card types when it's in your graveyard. So if you have no other cards, if there's no if there are, oh boy, I'm losing my speech here. If there are no cards in any graveyards and Tarfire hits the graveyard, your Tarmogoyf is a 2/3. As opposed to being a 1/2, because it's a tribal instant. I think most of you understand this by now, but for those of you who don't, tribal does count separately from instant. So that's why I'm playing Tarfire. It is an extra removal card as well, or it can go straight to your opponent's face, which is all relevant, I feel. And I mean, this is a flex spot. If you don't want to play Tarfire, you could remove it and play something else. 4 of Lightning Bolt, of course. Dreadbore. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, very relevant. There are a lot of planeswalkers lingering around in the meta right now, so the ability to destroy any creature or any planeswalker is very powerful. Not a lot of Jund decks play Dreadbore, surprisingly. I think they should play a bit more of Dreadbore. Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far in this deck, and I think a 2-of fits perfectly well. Last but not least, Culligan's Command. This is a great utility card. You can do a bunch with it. It's not technically removal. It can remove, it can resurrect cards from your graveyard and bring them to your hand, and it also forces your opponent to discard a card from their hand as well. So, you know, there are 4 abilities, you get to choose 2 at any given time. Very, very powerful utility card for 3 mana, and, you know, it gives you a lot of options, and I think 2-of also makes sense here. The cantrips, there are only really 4 of. Well, there's really only 1 cantrip, and there are 4 copies of it. Mishra's Bauble, for obvious reasons. We can play it here, helps grow your Tarmogoyf, helps you draw into more cards. You know, set up your next draw step using fetches. It gives you information on your opponent's library, what they're about to draw. Gives you a bunch of stuff, so I think 4 of Mishra's Baubles works pretty well. We're playing 2 discard, well, at least devoted or focus discard spells in this case. We're playing Inquisition of Kozilek. We're playing 2 copies of it. You have a lot of other cards in this deck that discard from your opponent's hand, so I didn't feel like we needed more. At one point I was playing 4, then I went down to 3, and then I stuck to 2. I think 2 Inquisition of Kozilek is more than enough. You're playing Kroxa, Culligan's Command, you know, you're targeting your opponent's library with Thieves Guild Enforcer. You're doing enough. So I think 2 of Inquisitions is okay. The Planeswalkers. Alright, so Wrenn and 6. We're playing 2 of Wrenn and 6, and we're playing 3 Liliana of the Veils. Wrenn and 6, listen, we have the colors. It's a powerful Planeswalker. It can come down turn 2. It helps you, you know, hit your land drops if you're not hitting them. So it helps you keep slightly greedier hands, opening hands, I should say. And I've done that plenty of times. I won a game just by -1ing Wrenn and 6 and targeting my opponent for 1 damage and boom, killing them. You'll see that match today. So that was pretty funny. It's just a powerful card overall. It's -7, its ultimate is cool. Not something you necessarily care about in this deck. It's more its +1 and its -1 that you want to play with. And I think 2 of is perfectly fine. Your opponents are going to target it to try and get rid of it, which is okay because that means they're going to maybe ignore your creatures, and I feel like that would be a mistake on your opponent's part. Liliana of the Veil. Great card here. Again, it's more discard, you know, which is why we're not running too many Inquisition of Kozileks. And it also, you know, is going to be good against opponents that don't have many creatures but are relying on a few to win out games. It's, you know, her -2 ability to force them to sacrifice a creature oftentimes is going to be pretty brutal. I don't think I need to explain too much why we play Liliana of the Veil. We can here. Obviously, if you don't want to play Liliana of the Veil, it's not your style, you can trade her out, play something else, but I think it works pretty well. So let's get on to the lands. So again, you're going to notice that this mana base is very familiar structure. I feel like a broken record, but I have to say this because some people haven't seen my previous deck decks yet. This mana base is based off of my Temur Delver mana base that I've been using for essentially 5 years. It's basically what I go with for most of my decks. You know, you have a set amount of fetches, you have 9 to 10 fetches, you have about 4 shocks, you have, you know, between 3 and 4 basics, and depending on how many lands you're playing, in this case I believe we're playing 19, if my math is correct, then you start going into check lands, which is what I usually do. So I have 1 Blackleaf Cliffs as well. But generally speaking, you have, I mean, take a look, I have 3 Verdant Catacombs in this case, 4 Bloodstained Mires, and 3 Wooded Foothills. That's it for your fetch package. Your Stomping Ground, Blood Crypts, and Overgrown Tombs to help you, you know, fix your mana. And then you have your basics to fetch if you want to be conservative with your life, or if you're getting Path to Exiled, or something, Assassin's Trophied, or whatever, Field of Ruins. There are plenty of cards, removal cards that your opponents can play against you that, you know, tell you can go get a basic. So this is why it's good to play a certain amount of basics in your deck. I really enjoyed this mana base. You can choose to play utility lands if you want to. It's really your choice, but I prefer playing lands that do what they're supposed to do, which is produce mana when you need it. The sideboard, again, the sideboard is really going to be changing one meta to the other. I haven't made the Jund sideboard deck tech yet, or I should say sideboard tech video. That's coming soon, but until then, let's quickly go through the options here. Collective Brutality for extra discard or creature removal or life gain. That's essentially why I'm playing it in the side. So if you're playing any kind of deck where maybe a combo deck where you need to target their instants and sorceries more, or even a control deck, removal for more creatures, or if you just need to gain life because you're playing against a burn deck, Collective Brutality is going to be good there. Surgical Extraction, 3 of course, you're milling your opponent quite a bit usually, or discarding their hand quite a bit usually, so Surgical Extraction is going to be good against combo decks or other decks that have clutch cards where they really rely on them, or win conditions that might be hitting the graveyard early. You target that, take out their win conditions, and it makes it much harder for them to win the game. Huntmaster of the Fells, of course, I'm playing red-green something, so I'm going to play Huntmaster of the Fells in the sideboard. Again, I've said it many times, the average amount of turns that I continue to play once Huntmaster of the Fells hits the battlefield is about 2 to 3, because at that point I either win or my opponent concedes. That's the average. Yes, sometimes I lose, but most of the time I win. You're going to see a match. You're going to see the matches today. It's stayed true so far. Prove me wrong. Huntmaster of the Fells is great. Take a look at the flip side. I usually don't show the flip sides here because of screen real estate. But take a look at what happens when it flips to its other side. You can manipulate it pretty easily in a Jund shell as well, although I have to admit Teamer shells are pretty good at manipulating Huntmaster of the Fells to make it flip back and forth. But again, you're going to see some games go up today where Huntmaster of the Fells flips back and forth pretty frequently and just is devastating to your opponent. Just devastating. I love it. It's good against mid-range decks or even aggro decks. It's good. It's going to get you life, grant you creatures. It's going to be removal. It's everything you need. Assassin's Trophy, extra removal, essentially. Not necessarily for creatures, but more for permanents. If you're worried about Blood Moon or Planeswalkers or something else, bring in more Assassin's Trophies. Cleansing Wildfire, I'm still not sold on it after all the games I've grinded with. At the end of the day, I don't feel that Blood Moon is going to work very well in a deck that requires double black or double anything that's not red, which is why I tend to shy away from Blood Moon, unless you're playing a two-color deck, and that's a different story. But in a 3-color deck, Blood Moon becomes a bit of it becomes too cute. When you need double black, and you do need double black here, in particular for Nighthawk Scavenger, but also for Liliana the Veil, among other cards. So Cleansing Wildfire is the card I picked. I'm 50-50 on it still. I want to try Alpine Moon in a way to shut down more of the combo decks, so I guess this would be more of a meta call. If you're playing against a lot more land decks, like the Primeval Titan decks or whatever, Valka decks, then maybe you want to go with Alpine Moon. If not, Cleansing Wildfire, I think, is an okay alternative. Last but not least, Veil of Summer. Well, you're still playing green. Play Veil of Summer. It's going to come in handy against control decks, and this deck does fold, unfortunately, pretty hard to control decks, at least in my experience. I don't know, maybe it's just me not playing it very well, but Veil of Summer is definitely going to help you out against the control matchups. Alright, last but not least, let's get over with the matchup. So, combo decks. Combo decks are going to be 50-50. So, you do have a lot of removal. If the combo decks require permanence on the battlefield, I think you're going to be okay. If the combo decks are just fiddling with themselves, they're going to play a bunch of Prison-y CRAP onto the battlefield, like Ensnaring Bridge. Well, Ensnaring Bridge is not that bad because you could probably remove it if you get the removal in time. But if your opponent is just playing Solitaire with themselves because they're going to feel good winning playing Solitaire, this deck is going to have a bit of trouble with that because already they're not playing an interactive game, and you're going to have trouble interacting with stuff they don't want you to interact with. I mean, as simple as that. You don't have permission spells here. You have removal spells, but removal spells are only really good for permanents, not so much for spells on the stack, and that's where a lot of combo decks or degenerate decks, lie. That's where they win. Now, if you're playing a Primeval Titan deck, you might have a better chance there. Again, mostly because of your side or even some mainboard removal. You have discard. You can get rid of cards that are going to help them accelerate. But other degenerate decks, they're just going to be a pain. I played against like Land Destruction deck, which was just stupid. Very few times that I actually message my opponents and say sarcastically that they have a great deck because I don't feel like it's good sportsman-like behavior. But I just really lost it with the Land Destruction deck that just destroyed your lands. It's very annoying. Anyway, so decks like that you're not going to win a lot against. That's just how it is. Aggro decks, I feel against aggro decks you actually do pretty well. You know, even if they're going wide, you play a decent amount of creatures. They're pretty big, they're impactful, and you're discarding your opponent's hand as well. So, you know, they're going to have to vomit everything out. And if they don't, then you're going to pick it out anyway. So I think aggro decks are pretty good matchups for you. And you have life gain built into the deck as well, if you need it. Big mana decks. Again, this might be a bit tougher, but you do have removal. You do have removal that can target Planeswalkers main board, which is important. It really matters, you know, first of all, if you have it in your hand early on, and it depends on how quickly your opponent kind of cycles out. I think against Eldrazi Tron, you're a bit better positioned because you can deal with the creatures. If Tron is just playing, Ugin turn 3 or turn 4, you're probably going to lose. But I think that's true for a lot of decks. I think, again, you have more tools in Jund to deal with Tron, especially in the sideboard. So I'd say it's more 50-50 than anything else. So not magic, or dredge, if you don't know what not magic is. Again, here, you have a lot of removal. The thing is, you're filling up their graveyard, and Dredge likes filling up their graveyard. So this is going to be a problem for you. This is just going to be, it's just how it is. You know, what is going to help you is surgical extraction from the sideboard, because then you'll be able to at least target cards in their graveyard and get rid of them. But again, you're kind of helping your opponent as you discard their hand, as you mill them. You know, that's not necessarily doing you any favors. So against Dredge, it's going to be tough. If you're playing a Dredge heavy meta, or you expect to be playing Dredge a lot in a particular tournament, this Tarmohawk in general, any flavor of it, is going to be a bit difficult. But if you really want to play Tarmohawk, great. Make sure your sideboard is packed accordingly. Control decks are really where this deck does not shine. I found to have a lot of trouble playing against control decks. Yes, you can win. I beat Izzet Control, but it's tough. It's an uphill battle. 40-60 to start in terms of your win chance, and that's not in your favor, obviously. Again, I think you could probably make some adjustments to the sideboard, even the main board, to kind of deal with it. I don't think it's an impossible matchup at all, but it's difficult. It really is difficult. I don't know why. It just is. Sultai managed to deal with control much better, but also because you have your own permission package, so you can stop their permission. Whereas here, you're at the mercy of what they have in their hand. It's just how it is. So if they have you in a cryptic command lock, yeah, you're not getting out of it. It's just how it's going to work. Mid-range decks, I think you shine pretty well. I mean, I should say this deck shines pretty well against mid-range decks. Your mid-range deck yourself, you pack a lot of removal in the main board, so you're going to be able to deal with their early and late game threats. And yeah, you're just very impactful. You're milling them, you're discarding them, which your opponent may be doing to you as well, at least the discard part, but you just have a lot of firepower here. So I think mid-range decks in general go in your favor. If I want to be conservative, I would say at least 50-50, but probably edging more towards you than them. And that's it for Jund Tarmohawk, deck 2 of 3 in the Tarmohawk series. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with Jund. I think I enjoyed Sultai more, but just because I'm more of a blue mage than anything else, so I'm definitely biased there. But I think if you like Jund, or Jund-like decks, then Jund Tarmohawk might be where you want to start. If you want to start playing with Nighthawk Scavenger. It's a fun card. It really, really is. I never feel bad playing it. It always feels like it's a powerful play. Whenever I play Tarmogoyf, it already feels pretty powerful. I'd say Nighthawk Scavenger comes pretty close to that, which is always a good feeling to have. So check out the deck. There's going to be a link in the description of this video with the full list. Obviously, all my deck techs are like that. All my matches are like that. There's 3 matches that are going to be going up today, so stay tuned for those, of course. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, whichever social network you prefer. All that stuff really helps me out a lot. It helps with the algorithms everywhere, spreading the word about my channel. A big thank you to all my patrons. That Patreon is slowly growing. I think the tier changes that I made recently are helping with that. Check out those tier changes. Basically, you supporting me means I'm going to support you back at the end of the year. You're going to all get mythics and rares in your mail. So basically, you're guaranteed a win in a giveaway, essentially. And no bulk rares and mythics with actual value will be sent to you. And a select few randomly patrons will also get bigger ticket cards in their winnings. So check that out. Patreon, appreciate the support. Thanks, and have a good one.